An airport security agent tore her expensive designer garment purely for amusement. He was unaware her spouse held controlling interests in the airport. Do you ever experience those moments when life appears ideally arranged just before it suddenly goes awry? Eleanor Vance certainly did. It was a balmy Thursday afternoon in late September, the Mesa sun casting that distinct, hazy golden light. Not oppressively hot, nor truly cool, simply perfect. Eleanor stood outside Terminal 3 of Phoenix Gateway Airport, her luggage beside her, chauffeur long departed, holding a ticket to the most pivotal soiree of her professional life in her handbag. She adjusted her eyewear, smoothed the fabric of her deep emerald green dress, a bespoke hand-sewn silk creation, and proceeded towards the entrance with an elegance that naturally drew attention without seeking it. Eleanor was more than just an elegantly dressed woman. At 38, she was incredibly astute and one of the most highly sought-after event coordinators in the Southwest. Major companies hired her for six-figure galas. Political figures pleaded for her expertise with their fundraisers. Her professional standing was built on meticulousness. That evening's formal event in Monterey represented a critical opportunity, particularly with a tech magnate as the main speaker, and a guest list filled with individuals capable of transforming her career trajectory with a mere handshake. However, beneath her composure, Eleanor felt weary. 3 consecutive weeks of events, a young child suffering from night terrors, and her husband Marcus, encouraging as ever, managing conference calls, and a sick dog back home. All she required was for this flight to proceed without incident. Naturally, it did not. She guided her stylish carry-on towards the security area, her heels echoing, her thoughts already practicing the speech she was slated to deliver. The queue for security was unexpectedly short. She presented her identification, offered a polite smile, and passed through the screening device without issue. Or so it seemed. "Ma'am," a voice called out, youthful, arrogant, overly loud. She pivoted. A security agent, likely in his mid-20s, badge identifying him as J. Carson, approached her with a grin suggesting he was about to win a wager. "We need to conduct an unscheduled additional check," he declared. Eleanor paused. "I've already passed through the scanner." "Still unscheduled," he retorted. "Standard procedure." She glanced beyond him towards the supervisor, a woman in her 50s who paid them no attention. Other lines proceeded smoothly, travelers moving through without interruption. She recognized the situation instantly. She had encountered it previously. No amount of sophistication or composure could prevent being targeted. Yet Eleanor refrained from arguing. It wasn't her way. She gave a single nod and accompanied Carson to the designated area. "Arms extended," he commanded. She obeyed. He initiated the search, excessively detailed. His hands lingered inappropriately on her shoulders, applied undue pressure along the dress's seams. His demeanor had altered, becoming theatrical, as if seeking an audience. "Are you certain this garment is authentic?" he questioned, lightly pulling at the strap. "It's bespoke," she answered evenly. "Kindly refrain from pulling it." "Merely checking for concealed devices," he countered with a shrug, pulling forcefully. That's precisely when it occurred. A distinct tearing sound. Audible gasps erupted. From the queue behind her, Eleanor remained motionless, the left side of her body completely revealed as the dress ripped from her armpit down to her hip. One hand reflexively grasped the ruined fabric, the other still partially raised as instructed. The world around her seemed to halt. Onlookers stared, some murmured, yet none stepped in. John Carson glanced down at the damage he'd caused. A brief moment of alarm crossed his face, quickly masked by a conceited gesture. "My mistake," he stated. "You can adjust your clothing and proceed through again." Eleanor offered no response. She was incapable. Her jaw felt tight, her hands shook. She turned, walked away from the security line without uttering a word, located a secluded corner near a wall, and retrieved her phone. This incident transcended a damaged dress. It concerned being publicly stripped, literally and figuratively, of one's self-respect before indifferent strangers. Eleanor sat isolated in the terminal corner, her dress clumsily secured beneath her coat, knees pulled close, one shoe halfway off. Her luggage remained untouched nearby, her phone resting on her lap as if it carried immense weight. Tears hadn't come. Not yet. But her throat felt parched, her thoughts chaotic. Embarrassment enveloped her like dense air. She could still sense the gazes, the profound silence following the tear, the security agent's persistent sneer even after causing the damage. She hadn't anticipated an apology. She wasn't that naive, but she hadn't braced for malice either. And malice was precisely how it felt. Eleanor took a slow, deep breath and finally selected a contact on her device. It rang twice before a recognizable voice answered, calm, reassuring, her support. "Hi, love," said Marcus. "Boarding shortly." Her prolonged silence prompted, "Ellie?" She cleared her throat. "I need you to hear me out, and please don't react angrily." Instantly, his demeanor changed. What transpired? She recounted the events methodically, providing every detail. Being singled out, the inappropriate force of his touch, the exact moment the seam yielded, and the passivity of the onlookers. Marcus listened without interruption, absorbing everything, until her voice faltered. Then he posed a single query. What was his identification? "Carson, J. Carson," she murmured. He seemed utterly pleased with himself. A lengthy pause followed on his end. She could hear his breathing, sense him, walking back and forth. She could envision it, hand to chin, gaze intense, mind strategizing. Then he uttered the words that made her sit up straighter. "Remember that investment firm I mentioned last year, the one we acquired a majority stake in for regional infrastructure development?" "Yes. It controls Phoenix Gateway Airport." Blinked. "Processing." "Pardon?" Marcus's voice remained composed but now curt. "I hadn't mentioned it previously as it wasn't pertinent. It is now." Eleanor remained silent. Uncertainty washed over her, relief, resentment. She merely observed the throng of people moving past, rendering her unseen. "Are you all right?" he inquired softly. "I will be." Marcus sighed again. "Stay. Put. Don't move. I need to make a few calls." "Marcus, I don't intend to cause a disturbance," he replied, "but I refuse to let this go unchallenged either." Unbeknownst to Eleanor, within 10 minutes of that conversation, individuals across 3 separate departments were actively retrieving security recordings. Meanwhile, back at the SU, security checkpoint, Officer J. Carson casually leaned against a wall near the staff lounge, laughing derisively with a colleague. "Did you catch her expression?" he snorted. "As if I'd intentionally damaged such an expensive dress. She ought to be grateful, likely a counterfeit anyway." His older, visibly uneasy colleague glanced around nervously, whispering, "You're aware they have surveillance, aren't you?" Carson dismissed it with a wave. "Hardly. Half of it gets erased within 24 hours. Nobody pays attention." He was mistaken. A woman dressed in a sharp black suit, displaying a Homeland Security identification, materialized at the hallway's end shortly after. "Agent Carson," she addressed him coolly, "you are required to accompany me." His grin vanished. "Does this concern the earlier screening?" he inquired, already adopting a more formal posture. As he followed her down the corridor, he quickly grasped this was no minor reprimand. A meeting room stood prepared. A regional security manager was present. A legal consultant participated via video link. Displayed behind them, frozen on a monitor, was a clear, wide-angle image from the overhead camera capturing Carson's hands forcefully pulling Eleanor's dress, followed by the precise moment of the tear. Audio was unnecessary. The visual evidence spoke volumes. "This constitutes a formal disciplinary hearing," the manager stated directly. "You are placed on immediate suspension pending the investigation's conclusion. You are forbidden from interacting with any travelers or personnel until further notice." Carson attempted to speak, but his words failed him. Back in the main terminal, Eleanor sat quietly, oblivious to the discreet turmoil unfolding on her behalf. Yet the true injury wasn't the ruined garment, it was the collective failure of anyone to intervene when the incident occurred. Eleanor eventually relocated to a deserted gate further down, seeking a quieter spot where she wouldn't be recognized or deliberately ignored. She drew her coat more tightly around herself, legs crossed, phone resting idly. Her anger had subsided, at least outwardly, but an internal shift had occurred. This wasn't about personal pride or seeking vengeance. It centered on that critical juncture when others deem your self-worth optional, expendable, and she refused to passively accept that. The airport manager approached her 20 minutes later, polite, anxious, his tone carefully modulated, rehearsed. "Mrs. Vance, I wish to offer apologies on behalf of the airport administration and security for your experience earlier. We are launching an immediate inquiry." Eleanor arched an eyebrow. That was prompt. He fidgeted slightly. "A call was received from one of our investment firm's associates, Mr. Marcus Vance." She acknowledged with a slight nod. "He is my husband." The manager visibly gulped. "He is highly esteemed," he remarked cautiously. "We were not aware of your connection, but rest assured, this matter is being addressed with utmost seriousness, irrespective of any affiliations." Eleanor allowed a moment of silence before replying. "I am not requesting special treatment," she affirmed. "I demand responsibility for myself and for other women who lack someone like Marcus to place a call." The manager nodded, finally making eye contact. "We understand." He presented her with a formal black file. "This contains the initial incident documentation. You possess every right to take further action. Legal recourse, media involvement, as you see fit. We have secured the recordings. We will offer full cooperation." Eleanor took the file. Its weight felt less like empowerment and more like a load. Litigation wasn't her goal. Media attention wasn't desired. Her true desire was for that agent, Carson, to face her and comprehend that she wasn't merely a woman in a dress. She was an individual with an identity, a family, a purpose. Her flight rescheduled for later that evening, she finally embarked, clad in a sweater purchased from an airport shop and yoga pants from her carry-on, kept for emergencies. She hadn't anticipated needing them, but such is life. It seldom seeks permission before disrupting one's plans. Upon arriving in Monterey, a vehicle awaited her. The soiree had commenced, and Eleanor realized she lacked time to change into more formal attire. It didn't matter. She arrived late, modestly dressed, hair impeccable but attire casual. The gathering, filled with formal wear, turned as she entered. Her assistant, Chloe, hurried over. "Eleanor, heavens, are you all right?" Eleanor offered a gentle smile, squeezing her hand. "I'm okay. Let's locate our table." That evening she delivered her speech. No elaborate gown, no sparkle, no feigned composure. Just her voice. Articulate, firm, authentic. "My original intention was to discuss connection tonight," she addressed the attendees, glass aloft. "However, I've come to understand that connection is meaningless without esteem, be it in commerce, friendship, or a brief encounter at airport. Security, how we exercise power over others, is crucial." Silence fell, even the waitstaff paused. "Therefore tonight," she went on, "I propose a toast to self-worth. The kind not derived from status or wealth, but from fundamental human decency. It's something we all are entitled to." She softly tapped her glass and returned to her seat, met with a standing ovation, unexpected, yet profoundly validating. Yet, Despite the impact of that moment, an internal need for resolution persisted. And resolution, here, necessitated a showdown. 3 days hence, Eleanor entered the administrative section of Phoenix Gateway Airport, not as a traveler, but as someone demanding settlement. No cosmetics, no adornments, just a simple black blazer, trousers and athletic shoes. Her hair was secured in a low ponytail. Her appearance conveyed serious intent, matching her purpose. A legal representative from the investment firm accompanied her, mostly silent. His presence sufficed. Eleanor was already familiar with the procedures, the rules, the influence. Marcus had ensured her complete access to the proceedings. Down the corridor lay a small conference room. Present were 2 security managers, an airport human resources official, a union delegate, and Officer J. Carson. He didn't immediately recognize her, not in this attire, without the dress, but as she took the seat opposite him, her gaze steady, head held high, he tensed. Silence descended upon the room. The HR official began. "We are convened for a facilitated conversation concerning the incident last Thursday involving Mrs. Eleanor Vance and Officer John Carson. This is a private meeting and will not be documented." Eleanor leaned onto the table, elbows resting. "I have no interest in justifications," she stated firmly. "I am here so he can listen to me, so he can comprehend." Carson shifted uncomfortably. His earlier sneer had vanished. The room was devoid of laughter. "You identified a black woman in formal wear and chose her as your victim," she asserted. "You disregarded procedure. You treated me without respect. You degraded me before strangers and damaged something precious, not merely the garment, but a concept you evidently failed to grasp." Carson started to speak, then stopped. "I too have experienced difficult days," Eleanor acknowledged, "yet never have I used them as a pretext to rob someone of their decency." Carson finally responded, his voice subdued and defensive. "I didn't intend to tear it. It was simply part of the inspection. I wasn't thinking." "Precisely, you weren't," she cut in. "You failed to think, you failed to care, and you assumed there would be no consequences." The managers remained quiet. They had reviewed the footage. They had observed his expression when the dress ripped. The purpose now wasn't to verify events, but to determine the future course. Eleanor addressed the HR representative. "I do not want payment for silence," she declared. "I do not want a public relations statement. I demand a formal record of this individual's conduct added to his employment file, ensuring the next woman subjected to such treatment doesn't find herself isolated in a terminal, torn between tears and outrage." The HR rep acknowledged. "Furthermore, I insist on the immediate implementation of a training procedure for these scenarios, encompassing gender awareness, physical limit protocols, and proper intensification steps." The managers exchanged looks. "That is achievable," one conceded. Carson looked up, his face flushing. "Are you attempting to destroy my livelihood?" he questioned, resentment evident in his voice. Eleanor met his gaze unflinchingly. "You accomplished that yourself." No one spoke in his defense. The meeting concluded soon after. Carson was suspended without pay while awaiting a formal internal assessment. Eleanor didn't linger to witness any outcome. She departed the room just as she had entered, composed, resolute, serene. Outside, Marcus waited by the vehicle, leaning against the passenger side, arms folded. He remained silent until she approached. "How did it unfold?" Eleanor put on her sunglasses. "Fruitful." He held the door for her. "Interested in lunch?" She offered a slight smile. "Only if accompanied by fries and an absence of inquiries." They drove away from the premises, the airport diminishing in the rearview mirror. The path forward seemed clear. Later that week, Eleanor found a letter in her post. It was machine-printed, unsigned with only a concluding line from an observer. The message was brief. I remained silent then. I regret that. I witnessed his actions towards you and did nothing. I apologize. It was unjust. Eleanor folded the note and placed it in her desk, not because it rectified the situation, but because it signified another witness. And perhaps, just perhaps, they might act differently in the future. However, even with measures taken, a persistent question remained. What if she lacked influence? What if it involved someone else? Someone potentially disbelieved? This consideration stayed with her, subtly motivating her subsequent actions. Eleanor refrained from discussing the event publicly. She avoided social media posts. She didn't contact journalists or create a viral narrative. Yet this didn't equate to silent acceptance. The following month, she collaborated with a trusted civil rights lawyer and a small coalition of supporters concentrating on traveler protection regulations. Their approach was low-key, practical. Genuine individuals engaged in tangible efforts, advocating for sensible policy reforms. Initiatives like compulsory body cameras for security personnel during unscheduled screenings, openness in complaint, reporting, and independent review panels at key airports. The work lacked glamour, but was vital. Her reputation facilitated access. Marcus's financial backing sustained the effort. Yet the primary driving force was her personal account and the numerous quiet narratives shared by others who contacted her, detailing similar experiences. Strangers subjected to non-consensual touching, degradation, condescension, disregard. Eleanor became a reflection for them, and this newfound responsibility surpassed the significance of a single damaged dress. Nevertheless, occasionally, during the quiet late hours when the house settled and her child slept, she would mentally revisit the incident, the tearing sound, the ensuing silence, the acute sensation in her chest, not due to incomplete healing, but because genuine recovery involved recalling precisely why she chose to speak out initially. One evening, while coordinating arrangements for a corporate function in San Diego, a young woman approached her near the refreshments, barely 20, clad in staff attire, clutching a clipboard nervously. "Pardon me, are you Eleanor Vance?" Eleanor turned. "That depends on the inquirer," she replied with a gentle smile. The young woman chuckled nervously. "Apologies. I'm Layla, assisting the vendor crew. I merely wished to express gratitude." "Gratitude for what?" Eleanor inquired, curious. "I noticed your name on the event plan and suspected it was you. My cousin informed me about the airport incident," she explained. "Your response provided her with encouragement." Eleanor's smile softened, becoming more genuine. "She's currently pursuing higher education," Layla continued, "studying law, expressed a desire to become someone who ensures women like yourself aren't compelled to justify their experiences." Eleanor was initially speechless, simply nodding. "Encourage her to persevere," she eventually responded. "Individuals like her are needed." This interaction resonated deeply, not for its emotional weight, but as a reminder that influence isn't always overt. Sometimes it manifests as a single individual observing your actions and choosing a better path as a result. For Eleanor, that held profound meaning. Several weeks thereafter, the Transportation Security Administration discreetly publicized an updated screening protocol for additional checks, revised awareness directives, initiation of new training programs, and an enhanced reporting mechanism designed not to dismiss complaints based on arbitrary criteria. Eleanor's name was never explicitly mentioned. It wasn't necessary. Her actions had already left an indelible mark. And the torn garment? She made no attempt to mend or substitute it. It remained in a protective bag at the rear of her wardrobe, ripped, carefully folded, undisturbed. She retained it not as a memento of distress, but as a symbol of resilience, of the precise moment she rejected silence, the instant she resolved to reclaim her narrative. Because often, the most significant element one possesses isn't physical attire. It's one's personal limits, experiences, fortitude, and that is something immune to being torn away. If you have ever felt degraded, ignored, or treated as if your perspective was insignificant, let this narrative serve as a confirmation. Your feelings are valid, your reactions are justified, and you are not isolated. Assert yourself, even amidst apprehension. And upon witnessing injustice towards another, refuse passive observation, intervene, for silence shields the perpetrator, not the afflicted. Should this account resonate with you, please share it with someone who might benefit from its message. The impact of your voice strengthening another is immeasurable, and if you've undergone a similar ordeal, consider sharing your story below. Together, let's affirm that esteem isn't negotiable, it is an inherent right.